Welcome to the greatest machine I have ever made. This is a fully expandable quarry using just the standard create and vanilla blocks, and here it is mining out a 256 by 256 block perimeter. This is compatible with both Forge and Fabric and should work with almost every Minecraft and Create mod versions. This vastly exceeds the limits of what can be done using just vanilla Minecraft mechanics, and from my research is a great improvement on the current available quarry designs in the Create mod. From my basic calculations, this mines about 250,000 blocks per hour and takes 15 to 25 hours to complete, depending on the size of the perimeter. The machine has 3 degrees of movement on the X, Y, and Z axes, and has sufficient item collection, storage, processing, transportation, and is incredibly easy to set up and drastically better than all other large-scale Create mod quarry designs that are currently available. The mining chassis is safe from random cobble or obsidian generation and is not affected by water or lava. This farm covers all your needs and will mine every block down to bedrock and return, leaving you with a perfectly flat floor for a build, perimeter, or whatever else you need. This quarry is 100% AFKable and can by default span 128 by 128, or double that with 256 by 256 area. You'll get every resource within that area and it will be brought back to the central control panel to be stored. As you can see, it will not remove water or lava source blocks, but that can be done with modded or vanilla methods. The machine functions by mining all the way down to bedrock, and on the way up deposits its items. It then moves over 16 blocks and repeats the process until it reaches the end, where it brings itself back, moves over 16 blocks horizontally, and repeats the entire process. Hello and welcome back to the greatest machine I have ever made. And that is not an understatement. This thing is absolutely insane. And if you didn't see my video from last week going over my entire build process for this, you are in for a good one. I've talked a lot about why this quarry is better than others, but what exactly is better about it? For starters, the mining contraption is a 16 by 16 area, which isn't inherently better or worse than others, but for a large area like 128 by 128 or 256 by 256, it does actually speed up the process. I've seen 8 by 8s or 16 by 1, which would slow it down quite a bit. The second and probably the biggest is that it doesn't use any wait timers to get to the bottom. It doesn't assume how long it'll take for you to reach bedrock, which reduces any of the risks associated with using a timer. The main two issues with having timers is that you either wait too long or you wait not enough, resulting in the machine either not getting fully to the bottom or waiting at the bottom for too long. The third, and probably my biggest pet peeve with a lot of the machines, is that mine doesn't get stuck coming back up. A lot of the time, lava and water will mix above the machine, creating cobble or obsidian, which you'll then either have to break coming up or somehow avoid. For some reason, a lot of the machines don't have a top side of drills, which isn't used a lot, but it is used sometimes, and when that is used, it is incredibly important because that prevents anything from getting stuck. Fourth, and probably the biggest reason, is because this has 3 dimensions of movement. A lot of quarries that I've seen use 2 dimensions of movement with a similar like up and down and move over system, but that limits the width of the farm over the x-axis to only a certain number of blocks, the amount that you can drill without lagging out your game. This one is theoretically expandable way past 256 blocks if you use redstone link relays or other things like that. The fifth, and again, incredibly important, is that this is fully AFKable. Once set up, you do not need to check on it other than making sure that the timings are correct the first time you start it. Once it's working, it won't break. As long as everything is loaded in, nothing can break. It's really a simple contraption and it is fully AFKable. A lot of the ones that I've seen either require you to add more piston extenders at the end of a mechanical piston, or manually returning the miner once it's reached the end point. And then the final one that is again really helpful is item collection and transportation. Most miners I've seen either don't pick up the items that they mine, or they have chests on the miners themselves, but don't transfer the items once the miner comes back up from the mining session, meaning you're likely only able to mine a chunk or 2. And with all that out of the way, we can get on with the video. As always, the schematics for this are down in the description, and we won't be doing a block by block tutorial since that is a little bit complicated, but I will be going over exactly how to set up the schematic, exactly what is going on, so that if you wanted to build this on your own, you definitely can, and I'll be explaining the logic going along with it. So this quarry, as I mentioned, has 3 degrees of movement. The first one, obviously, up and down, the second one across, and the third one in the x-axis going horizontally into the abyss. We are looking at the 256 by 256 version. There's obviously the 120 by 128 version as well. And let's go over the mining machine first. So the mining machine is 2 sets of 16 by 16 drills, with the core being storage and general blocks. As you can see, this thing uses a ton of barrels, and I go over a ton of reasons why we're using barrels in my video from last week, but the gist is that item vaults sometimes break when you're unloading them, and barrels seem to not. The drills on top are meant for any cobblestone that is generated while the machine is down below. So as you can see, it does not take away water, nor does it take away lava. That is because those are liquids and can't be mined by drills. So those still have to stay, but that does mean that any lava that comes in, let's say there's a lava source here that comes and pours out after the mining machine has passed by, this will generate cobblestone on top of these blocks, causing the machine to break if we didn't have drills above it. We're going with the 16 by 16 area here because it is one of the more lag-friendly options, and it is big enough so that you don't need to wait 45 million hours for this thing to finish. I have estimated that this will take 15 to 20 hours to finish, depending on the height, the blocks below it, and the types of blocks below it. If you're digging out an entire 256 by 256 cube of obsidian, that's going to take slightly longer than if you're just doing air the whole way. But for something that you can 100% AFK, 16 hours is not too bad. That is 2 work days where you don't have to do anything. To go over how the machine works, as you can see, it moves over automatically and then goes down. While it's going down, it just keeps mining until it reaches bedrock, wherever bedrock may be. If we throw in a bedrock block right here, it will stop and go back up. We are using this little observer trick that observes when this thing turns into a full set of blocks instead of a moving contraption, which only happens at bedrock or when you're mining an unminable block. And once that happens, it turns into a solid block, notifies the relay up here, which then sends it over to this relay, which then sends it over to this, bringing the whole machine back up. Once it reaches the top, it just scoots over 16 blocks that it mines a whole new square, as you can see, and then repeats the process. All of that logic is handled right here by this sequenced gear shift. We just have some redstone weights, delays, and then that 16 move over piston. And then we also have some clutch and gear shift logic that is powered again by the sequence gear shift so that it will go for eternity until it reaches an unminable block. When this mining contraption reaches the end of the road there after 16 or 17 passes, this counter will notify that we are all out of counting blocks, which is the amount of times it moves over and down, meaning that we need to bring the entire thing back. All that logic is handled by this sequence gear shift on the right side of the farm, which brings the miner back 256 blocks with these 2 piston pulls, waits a certain amount of time, and then scooches the whole machine over 16 blocks in the x-axis. Then all the other counters and timers are reset as the process repeats itself. Eventually, you will have a fully empty quarry here, with the mining machine all the way at the end on the far side of the world. As I mentioned, the schematics for this are down in the description, but let's go over how you set up the schematic. As you can see, there are a ton of different signs on this thing, and that is because it may seem daunting, but it isn't really that complicated. The most important thing is that you have this in the correct orientation. Make sure that we are putting this into our world facing north and east. If that does happen, you'll have to either reverse some of these or reverse the output from this, and that is a huge hassle and not worth your time, especially when you're making a hole that has the same dimensions on all 4 sides. So just make sure that your F3 menu lines up with the compass that we have in the schematic itself, north, south, east, west, and then you should be good there. The only power source that you'll need is this windmill bearing here. This powers everything in the machine, which is really only the rope pulley there. That's the only thing that requires stress units. Everything else is a 0 stress unit design. And then we have a rotation speed controller to speed everything up to the max speed of 256 RPM. This is the on and off switch. This will turn it off in the smartest way possible, and that is only after it returns back to the start and moves over. So if you decide to turn this machine off halfway through running it, you will have to wait till it comes back to the start or risk unloading it in an insecure fashion, breaking the machine. To avoid any breaks or anything like that, don't break any of the redstone, obviously, and don't try to stop anything from happening. The only things I recommend are removing this block if you need to finagle any of the 2 gantry shafts that we have here into moving, but I would recommend saving that for anyone advanced and who actually knows what this farm does and exactly how each component works. In most cases, you won't need to remove this. As long as you're turning it on and off with this lever, and you're waiting until it comes back and stops before unloading the chunks, you should be good. You also don't need to be here while this is running if you have a chunk loader system set up. The only issue is that this is quite a few chunks, so it will take a lot of resources of your server, or if you're playing in a single player world, to load the chunks and do something else in another part of the world. So it is recommended to just run this while you're either sleeping or AFK for a couple of hours, just so that you get a big chunk out of the land. We're going to go over setting up the schematic, placing it into our world all right now. You can use a schematic cannon for this. I'm going to use the creative paste or print in world functionality, but a schematic cannon does not have a maximum range as long as the chunks are loaded. So as long as you can see the end of the areas, or you have a chunk loader or another system to place in all these blocks, a schematic cannon will work great. So to start, the only important thing that you care about, other than the north, south, east, west orientation, is the height. You cannot build this at max build height. You need to make sure that the redstone links on the mining contraption, once they reach bedrock, can still reach back up to the relay system on this gantry shaft. That means you at a maximum need to place this 256 blocks above the start of bedrock, which I think is Y level -60. I have had really good success in anything under Y level 145. So as long as you're placing it below that, you should be good. But if you want to, you can stretch your luck and go even higher. But all the math you need to do should be whatever Y level this block is going to be at with the relay plus 60. And as long as that's below 256, you should be all right. Once this is pasted into the world like this, you will get a blank canvas here. First and foremost, you'll need to set up a storage system that isn't a chest, because this will fill up in seconds. The second thing you need to do is to just double power this lever so that it actually turns on the redstone line here, and this will just prevent it from accidentally going when you don't want it to. The next thing you're going to want to do is place in all of the counters and other blocks into the system. The first one is going to be a stone block in this hopper here. This will prevent the farm from going, along with this off switch here, which is pretty necessary once we turn on the power. The next one is probably even more important, and this varies depending on if you have the 256 by 256 or 128 by 128 size, and it is this dropper. This is going to be the counter of how many times this thing moves over. For the 128 by 128, you just need to put in 9 of any building block here. It can be a stackable block of up to 64. It doesn't super matter what kind, as long as it is a 64 stackable block. I use dirt in my previous testing. I've used smooth stone now. It really doesn't matter. This is just a counter, and it just needs to be stackable for ease of use and so that the hopper doesn't fill up here. If you're using the 256 by 256, all you need to do is double the 9 to 18, and then you'll be good. You could probably reduce this to 17, but 18 won't incredibly reduce your rates, and it will just save you a little bit of hassle if you run into any issues. The final thing you need to do is over by this chest here, we're going to want to place in 2 wooden shovels. When those 2 shovels are in, you should be able to hover over this comparator and see a redstone output power of 2. If you can't find that though, just 2 shovels in here should be good. Once those few things are in, we should be good to power it on, which is just right-clicking this windmill bearing with an open hand. It should start all of the belts going in the correct direction, as you see. And once that happens, all we'll need to do is power off this lever, and the farm should start going on its own. You'll want to test initially that this thing moves over the desired amount of 16 blocks total. And when you've done that, it's likely that it is working. The best place to AFK as well, while we're waiting for this to go and move 16 blocks over, is going to be in the center of the perimeter here. So if you just kind of look at the 3 corners that you can see, and they're all in render distance, including all of the logic behind this corner, then you will be able to load in the entire perimeter and just make sure you are slightly above this Y level. So right now I'm at Y level 154, which is high enough since we're at, I think, 140 where the mining machine is. And now I can AFK here for pretty much ever until this is finished. A quick editor's note on removing liquids. There is not a good way to do it. There is a way to do it manually with a bunch of hose pulleys and water pulling out and stuff, but there's not a good way to do it for a massive area. There were some really good ideas down in the comments of my previous quarry video, like placing in deployers that will place blocks in empty blocks, like if we had water or something, and that works great going down. Unfortunately, as we're coming back up, it's going to place blocks coming back up, and then we get something like this. And that's not very Quarry. So unfortunately, this isn't gonna work as well as we'd like, but there is kind of another way to do it. I will have a tutorial coming out relatively soon in the next couple of weeks. So if you just subscribe, you should do that anyway. But if you subscribe, you should see that coming in relatively soon. The plan I have currently is to have a similar pulley system down and then have it stop at one block every single time. It will take a really long time to get down, but I think that is going to be the best way to do it, unfortunately. If you can't wait for the new tutorial, then you can obviously do it the manual way, but I think it will take quite a while. So definitely prepare your time and your brain for probably 20 more hours of just taking away liquids. And while the machine is running, if you want to use the perimeter for anything, we're going to need to get rid of all of these liquids. It's good to do this while the thing is running so that you don't have to do it all at the end when it's a huge monumental task. And when there are loads and loads of lines here, it is much easier to do it when you just see the perimeter itself. But if you're like me and you waited till the end to do it, there is still a pretty easy way to do it. We're going to need to grab a hose pulley, fluid pipe, mechanical pump, a way to power the mechanical pump and hose pulley. And then we're going to need a piston, a pulse repeater, some redstone, and a lever. We're going to set up just a mechanical pump going into this block right in front of the piston. The piston is going to occasionally extend, breaking the lava or water source block. We're going to need 2 pulse repeaters here just to delay it slightly enough so that this can continue to power like a clock. And you just power it on or off by flicking the lever. So what you're going to do is just flick it once quickly and it'll start going. While that's happening now, we're going to get in our hose pulley, connect it to power so that it drops down. And I'm just going to go to this much, and it doesn't really matter how low it goes, but I would want it probably like 2 or 3 blocks below the top of the lava source. It doesn't have to be super precise. It'll just depend on the speed of which you're going. So what's going to happen here is we're going to pump lava out here, and this piston is going to break it. You can see that we are picking up lava sources here, and we could probably also speed this up. I want to try 10 ticks. 10 is a little bit too quick. We do 12. Perfect. There we go. So 12 ticks and 5 ticks are the numbers I'm using here. They're not super exact, but I guess they're perfect. And you can see that we are removing lava quickly. It is removing each of the source blocks, and once it gets down back to the like kind of Y level that the hose pulley stops at, we'll just need to lower the hose pulley some more, and then it will keep going. And it already has gone down past that Y level, and it is all disappearing now, which is great to see. We should see all of this lava going away. Like over here, which I've already started working on. You can see we do have some cobble gen over here, and you can either mine this manually, I mean haste 2 is a thing, or you can bring the quarry back over and mine these few blocks and you'll be good. And now to go over the water removal, this part is a little bit more tricky because I mean they are infinite sources and they're usually in a bigger bunch. As you can see here, we have a hose pulley here going into the thing, but we are no longer getting any water. The reason for that is because we only have water sources from here on out. So we'll need to, and I want to just confirm that I am correct here. If we move it down anymore, it still won't do anything. And that is because we have water sources only over here. We want to get the hose pulley in the water source blocks. And if you don't want to use the piston method for this, you can technically use a fluid tank with a steam engine on top to turn it into a boiler and then pump water in from this. And the boiler will immediately delete the water, which is pretty cool, honestly. And if we bring this thing down just a couple of blocks below the surface, connect it up to power, you can see here that we are already draining the water still, even though that steam engine is on max water levels, which is good to see. We should see all of the source blocks here get removed, potentially up until this area. I'm not sure what the range is. I'm fairly confident though, that as long as the blocks are source blocks, it should continue to pull it. But we'll see. And my hypothesis was correct. Since we are still in the water source area, it is pulling water sources from all the way over here, which is awesome. And I don't know how this is happening, so I guess we don't need to block it off, but if we wanted to, we could really easily. The one final kind of difficult one to clear out is something like this. This is something that looks fairly similar to what we have over here with a bunch of source blocks, but if you look closer, we don't actually have that many. We have one here, couple here, one over here that's floating. Just don't even bother. And normally we could try to use a hose pulley, but that won't work here. You'll need to actively place in one block on all of these sources. And that is because they are just that. exactly 1 source blocks. If you tried to use a hose pulley, it would work for maybe this one and maybe this one and a couple of the other ones nearby, but it won't do all of them. And I honestly don't know if that's worth it. You can always try, but if you run into something like this where you have like, it looks like one little source block thing going on, it could be that you were mining in a lush cave or something like that that only has little pockets of water and not actually a whole lake, which is why it's not clearing as easily as you'd like. And this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. We have a couple of source blocks here, and it does start to reduce some of the water, but after it gets kind of that one, it will just kind of not work as well as you'd hope. So you can definitely set this up in a bunch of different places. It will help a little bit, but it won't be as good as you'd like. But that is going to be it for this machine that gives you a massive quarry perimeter of 128 by 128 or 256 by 256, is fully AFKable, delivers all your items back to the start, and is surprisingly not incredibly difficult to set up. We also go over how to clear out any of the liquids that you want to clear out. If you want to do that, you obviously don't have to get all the resources, but that is all. That is the quarry that is literally the greatest thing I've ever made in the Create mod. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you like it. And if you did, leave a like. If you're new here, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.